I just want to tell you that I love the Beatles. They have great music and great talent. I have their albums, t shirts, and items. I even enjoy the old cartoon of the Beatles that was made in the 60s. But it wasn't long until I found out there was a morbid secret of the cartoon. I was at a collector's shop where they had a section about the Beatles. I was looking for some Beatle mugs and pins. I bought 2 Beatle mugs and 4 Beatle pins, and just as I was about to leave the section, something caught my eye. It was a videotape called The Lost Beatles Cartoon. I really wanted to get it, so I told my mom that I wanted to buy it. And when I went to tell the counter worker that I would like to buy the tape, he said I couldn't have it. He told me that he watched it and had nightmares. I was surprised that he said that about the tape because it was the Beatles. How can a cartoon about a band be scary? But he said, never mind, you're just going to have nightmares anyway, and gave me the tape. And while I was walking away, I saw him folding his hands like he was praying. I was starting to feel like something's wrong with the tape. When I got home, I immediately went downstairs to watch this mysterious video. When the video went on, something weird happened in the beginning. It was the sound of screams of someone in agony. I was scared until the opening title was on. It was like usual. The episode was called Because, and I thought it had to do with the Abbey Road song, Because. Then the cartoon played, and something was wrong. It was totally different than the original style. It looked similar to the original, but it looked darker. Then the episode showed all 4 Beatles in their original design: John, Paul, George, and Ringo. They had voice actors that sounded like Paul Frees and Lance Percival. They were talking about some kind of a CD they found outside the recording studio and talking about listening to it. This was strange, as CDs weren't invented until 1976 and the show was produced in the late 60s. So then the scene showed John putting the headphones on until it happened. John all of a sudden just looked like he just blacked out. Then Paul said, "John, are you alright?" Then the screen zoomed up to John, who had started drooling. And all of a sudden, John's eyes turned into LSD acid trip image with weird colors. After 10 seconds of John's acid tripping face, something appeared. I grabbed the clicker and went backwards to see what it was. What I saw was a morbid, grotesque picture. It was a picture of a man with a ventriloquist dummy. The scary part of the picture was that the man with the dummy had no mouth. Instead, there was blood on his face, where his mouth is supposed to be. The dummy had fire in his eyes and an insane smile. I had to choke back some vomit after watching it. Then the screen went back to John's face. "Are you alright?" asked Ringo. Seeing is not believing. Seeing is killing. John soon got back conscious and said, "Yes. Yes, I am. What time is it, George?" "It's 1:13, said George. Then the screen went black and blood started to rain down. But this blood was hyper-realistic. It looked so real that, if I touched the screen, I would get blood on my fingers. The blood rain soon disappeared and soon showed the Beatles walking to a lake. A crowd of girls soon started chasing the guys for 30 seconds when all of a sudden a picture of a girl with no eyes, just her eye sockets dripping with blood. She had no teeth and more blood was pouring out of the mouth. It was another picture of a Zalgo victim that was popular on Creepypasta. I jumped back on the couch after seeing it. Then the screen went to John's face. And all of a sudden, the screaming of the fans stopped. And when all 4 of them turned around to check, all of the fans were on the ground, burning to a crisp. Paul, clearly petrified, asked, What happened?" Then the scene showed Ringo vomiting out red vomit with chunks of brown meat. Something caught my eye. I paused and looked closely at the vomit, and there was the face of... I was shocked that he was in the cartoon about the Beatles. "Just forget about," said John. "But what about our fans?" "I don't give a..." I was shocked that this episode involves John saying the F word, but I decided to continue on. The next scene showed a building that was about to be demolished. The Beatles were walking down a hallway when the wrecking ball hit the building. A piece of rubble went flying in the air. It was about to miss a person when John did the unthinkable. He pushed the man back to where the piece of rubble was about to fall. In a second, the piece of solid marble crushed the guy to death. Realistic blood and brain matter went everywhere. The blood and brain matter looked like it was real. A crowd of people surrounded the scene where the camera zooms up to John with an evil smirk on his face. The next scene only showed just a black screen. Only thing I heard was a gunshot. Then there was smoke that seems to represent the fired gun. Then the screen showed the recording studio where the Beatles record their music. There was no lights on, but I did hear mumbling, and I listened closely to hear someone saying, "I shouldn't have done that. They're going to know soon." Then one light went on. There was a shadow outside the door. It was the form of John. It wasn't long until the light was reflecting to the sound manager in the recording booth, dead. I quickly figured out he was shot by a shotgun. The camera zoomed up to the ground outside the room. In a quick shot, a model M1887 fell to the ground with blood on it and bits of smoke still coming out of the barrel. The next scene showed Paul and George and Ringo knocking on John's room door. Then Ringo, for some reason, busted down the door and there was a humongous safe that was the size of an SUV. They didn't know what the combination was, but for some reason it wasn't locked up all the way. They opened it up and they found out John's secret. He was a Satanist! There was a dead body of a woman on a pentagram with blood and her eyes gorged out. There were dead animals, a fan-made Necronomicon and goat skull on a pentagram. In fear, George fell to the ground. Paul had to choke back vomit and Ringo in a sad way started crying. The crying from Ringo didn't sound like normal cartoon crying. It sounded as real as day. And in a shock, I found out that the dead woman was Ringo's fiancée, Jenny. I didn't know that Ringo had a fiancée, but I was scared that Ringo's crying started to get mixed with screams of a girl. I started to suspect that's supposed to be the screams of Jenny. The screen went black. Then the screen showed the view of the sun setting from John's legs. The screen immediately went to John's face that had a mad expression and a rapid moving mouth. He had red in his iris. He had a noose around his neck. He was about to commit suicide. He shut his eyes and jumped. The camera showed John's feet still swinging. The camera zoomed out to show John's lifeless body hanging on a small cliff on the lake that the Beatles were going to in the beginning of the episode. The screen went black, and Paul appeared in a sad expression, and the screen went black again, and then the scary part begins. Without warning, Paul's face appeared with hyper-realistic eyes. There were so many camera views of Paul's face, like a zoom out of him, in the corner. Then pictures appeared. I remember seeing a picture of a hand with a gun in it, and the gun was pointed at a little boy's head, but the gun was already fired. Another on was a river with a garfish, and right behind the fish was the body of a couple in a bloody mess. The next picture was a burnt town. People were on the ground, dead. Quickly, I discovered that the town was destroyed during an attack. It was destroyed because of the Vietnam War. The next picture was 3 undertakers with 7 coffins with little children no younger than 6. And behind the left undertaker was coffin with a hand coming out of it, and the hand was moving. After more pictures, it shows Paul with the same expression that he had before the scary slide show. Then a voice appeared of a low, quiet voice saying, "Do it!" Then an M1911 Colt pistol appeared in Paul's hand. He puts it in his mouth and pulls the trigger. Realistic blood and brain matter went everywhere. Then the camera zoomed up to the capsule of the bullet that shot Paul, and the capsule said, "Your life was already over, Paul." The next scene showed George on a cliff from the same lake John committed suicide. He was about to commit suicide too. I thought he was going to jump off the cliff, but instead he pulled out a gun and shot himself. At the end of the scene, the camera zoomed to the gun, and the gun was the same gun Paul used to commit suicide. And the gun said, "It takes 2 bullets to kill 2 Beatles." It scared me a little bit. It sent chills down my spine. The next scene showed Ringo in the hospital, dying of an unknown disease. He took the picture of him and his fiancée and the engagement ring he gave her, and then he died. At the end of the episode, it appears to be in a dark hall. All I hear was screams, whistles, yelling, and gunshots. I soon found out that the hall was in a prison. The scary part was that every time the lamp swings in the hall, a black hooded figure appeared. It wasn't long until I found out it was John with gray skin and red iris. He said, "I hope you enjoyed your life, because my life is over, including my friends, all because of me. John." and right behind them was a crowd of guards and prisoners. It seems that some of them had bullet holes in their head and blood all over their bodies. And the weird part was that the prisoner that was right next to John was Mark David Chapman. It scared me how the guy who killed Lennon was right behind the evil demonic cartoon John Lennon. For 30 seconds, evil John and the crowd of prisoners and guards started walking straight like if they were walking towards me. The more they keep walking, the more blood they get on themselves. John started to turn into a snake in a weird way. His eyes turned reptilian, his skin turned scaly, and his tongue was in the form of a snake's tongue. Then the episode finally ended. I went backwards and kept rewinding the opening credits to believe how stupid I was to believe this was a nice episode. It wasn't long until something caught my eye. I looked closely at the bottom of the word because, and I paused to see that the episode was actually called Because of John, They're Dead. I was about to take the tape out until the VCR went on fire. I immediately got my mom and the fire extinguisher. We put out the fire and discovered that the VCR was still okay because we put in more Disney VCR tapes in and they worked fine. But the only thing that was destroyed by the fire was the tape, and it was the tape that started the fire. My mom and I went to the collector's shop and brought the tape back. A counter work for the Beatles section said, "What happened to the tape?" "It was set on fire when the tape ended," I said. He took the tape and threw it away. The next day, I was in the car with my mom to take something back that my dad forgot to take to work when we saw police surrounding a house and 6 men were being retrieved out of the house. My mom was told by an officer that 6 men were arrested for drug possession and grave robbery. It wasn't long until stuff came out of the house, and that stuff was like the things people use for recordings for cartoons. They even found drawings of what they say is a morbid cartoon. It involved the Beatles. The police were informed that they sold the tape to a collector's shop. I told the police I got the tape, and they showed me the drawings to see if I was right. I got all of them right. After telling them about the tape, they gave me an award of $200. I was glad that I got money, but that's the sight of seeing the tape scared half to death. For 4 days I had nightmares, and when the nightmares stopped, a tape appeared on my front porch, and it said, "You shouldn't have watched that, but I threw it away in the trash and never seen that thing again." But I wonder why the tape said that. All I can say is, goodbye and see you later.